John Jack Aloysius Messner, September 18th, 1927 to April 5th, 2012. God bless Jack Messner. That was the first memory I had as a kid of hearing someone talk about my dad. I was at our front window on a Sunday morning, waiting for him to get back from golf. When his car pulls up, 3 men and Dad jump out, and one of them says, "God bless Jack Messner," and they were all laughing about something Dad did on the last hole, probably a joke or a miracle putt. This was just the first of many times I was to hear a total stranger say something like that about Dad. And today, 50 years after that Sunday, and exactly 10 years since we were in this church for Mom, we paused to ask, who was this guy who could get that kind of universal reaction, and what might it all mean? Dad was a simple man who kept to a simple plan. Believe in the church's teaching about how to treat others, do those things, and teach those things to your children. Believe, do, teach. What is often so hard for many people was a no-brainer to him. During my last conversation with Mom 10 years ago, we were talking life and death, and she said, "Mike, I prayed for the simple faith that your father has. It's truly a gift." He testified to his beliefs with a consistency in both word and deed. I'd like to share examples of both. He had catchphrases, each one triggered by some situation that we learned to recognize and eventually to predict. This became a source of humor for us, and they also had the intended effect of making us pause and think. For example, when us kids were really going at each other, fighting and yelling, he'd say, "I should tape record you kids. You should hear what you sound like. When your mother and I are gone, you kids will have to depend on each other." And when something was bothering you, he'd say, "Take care of your problems when they're small." When he saw you being thoughtless to somebody, "You got to think of the other guy." If you were about to make a bad move in chess or later on in life, he'd say, "Are you sure you want to do that?" If you really disappointed him, you might hear, as I did one time, "I used to pray every day that I'd have good advice for you kids. Today, I prayed to just stay out of your way." Where'd he come up with this stuff? As he was trying to draw a card that he really needed, a card that would beat you and win the game for him, he'd say, "Be there when I drives up." And when he got that card that he needed, he'd say, "Give your soul to the Lord, 'cause I got your beep." When he bet us something, the stakes were usually a chocolate milkshake from Toff's. And when he won it, you'd hear a loud ka-ching synchronized with the arm motion of pulling a slot machine. In fact, Dad's grandson Bob and I both wound up owing Dad milkshakes from the last Super Bowl, but we weren't able to pay it off before his health slid so fast. HugsAround.com, and you'd laugh and say, "Oh, I haven't heard that one, HugsAround.com. Okay." He'd say, "No, really, give him hugs for me, Mike." And I'd say, "Oh, okay, I'll hug him for you." And he'd say, "Promise?" And when he got you to promise him something, like those hugs or a milkshake bet or a promise to let him know when you got home safely from a trip, then he'd say, "A promise is a promise now." And could chase down a 0% credit card faster than the growing U.S. debt. When you heard him ask, "Where you at?" you knew he had a telemarketer on the phone and was trying to find out where they were from, how the weather was out there, and what kind of deal could they offer. He spent a lot of time making friends from all over the planet. I recently learned that Mom once told her neighbor Rose Fistum, "Rose, if he goes first, I promise you I'm going to put a telephone in the casket with him." You could see him go into action when Aunt Frances moved back to Sandusky after 50 years in Florida. Dad became the younger brother, watching after his two older sisters, Mabel and Frances. Sometimes he overlooked the fact that they were pretty good at looking after themselves. And since they're all hearing impaired, the ensuing conversations were worth the price of admission. Dad was one of his generation's ultimate gamers. He enjoyed the competition of a good game of pinochle, knock poker, euchre, skip-bo, and Monopoly. He religiously played cards with his buddies at the KSC, and I can't remember any family gathering where we didn't have 3 card games going at once. In Monopoly, he was always inventing new ways to win. He once caused a 15-minute laughing break when he offered my neighbor to buy her turn. That's not in the rules, of course, but he made them up as he went along, and if we were gullible enough to take a deal he could think of, then too bad for us. Dad was very skilled at games, but he also seemed to instinctively know when to take a chance, telling us to do it if the spirit moves you. In euchre, for example, he would justify ordering his opponent up with a smile and a "I don't get nothing till I get set." Steve Coates' mom used to cringe at being his bridge partner, but it definitely worked for him. Aunt Mabel said Dad dearly loved to beat her at cards, and used to do so regularly until she learned to take more chances. He had his own way of doing things, and he wasn't going to change. He liked coming to his own conclusions. He asked questions and made inquiries, lots of them, but in the end, he did what he wanted to do. He must have seen a little of this in us, because his favorite way to end a discussion as we got older was, "You're gonna do what you're gonna do." Afterwards, we frequently had to let him know we wish we'd listened the first time. Even though he could be stubborn, he was also adaptable. Everyone was concerned how he would cope when Mom died. It took him a while to bounce back, but he established new routines around his house, with Aunt Mabel, with Martha and Jim, the KSCs, and of course St. Mary's, and he was content. My sister Marty and her family were there for Dad through it all and gave him a sense of love and security. I count my lucky stars that I got to know him and accepted him for exactly who he was. I remember the words in the song Larry Oprah played in tribute to his father, "I'm just a living legacy to the leader of the band." He taught me how to accept people for exactly who they were. Kathy sums up Dad's impact on her as challenging her to be the best she could be. Martha loved all the people around town who would take time out to tell her that Dad had made them laugh. For Sue, Dad exemplified a Catholic life and showed how unconditional love worked. Amy is grateful for the fighting spark she got from Dad and the memories riding horsey on his knee and dancing on the top of his toes. He will be remembered as a faithful husband, a loving father and brother, a good example to his family by consistency of word and deed, and most of all, a person who liked to insert a little smile and a laugh into this world whenever he could. So, Dad, we do now give your soul to the Lord, and we do believe we'll see you again, and we will take care of one another now that you and Mom are not here, and we will give hugs around from you, and the next time we see you, Bob and I will bring the milkshakes.